waiting, but because the water was this much, emergency plan people to come. Emergency plan people to come in. So
how long did it take for those emergency?
I think they took a good time because there was no the traffic was like this, and although we had about 4 to 5, I can see they say commanders of fire and everything. They were there. They were great. The police was there. Everybody was there. Ambulances, but good. There was no casualty. But yes, there was a hard time with the people who are like sick with one eye or with the hip replacement. My parents' knee replacements. They just choose not to go. So there was a lot of talking. Go, water is here now. Go, water is here now. When the water was here, then I had to kind of drag and then I just convince them. That was the hard part, but I could do it, take them and then, because otherwise they're going to get sick in the water or something, and then they're just very attached to the house and everything. Parents are very attached. And
it had been an official emergency.
Yes, it could have been. They could have done it before. Yeah. We don't know. At that time, I was just helping. And just go. My brain was like, bring that child. So the moms were like, oh, my pet is there, my kid is there, because she can't carry if she's pregnant with 2 children here and a 1 at the back. So they needed help. They yell out, and we hear every little scream we hear. Somebody's floating in the water. Make sure it's not a dustbin, it's a kid or something. Check everything. So I was just all around. I was the last person.
My very last question is, Mr. Cummins, how do we spell your name?
Manmeet, M-A-N.
And your last name?
M-E-E-T, Manmeet.
Yeah.
And last name is Malhotra, M-A-L-H-O-T-R-A.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
How are you?
Thank you for coming.
You've had a rough evening.
Yes, it
Yeah.
was. Yeah.
Yeah.
It
And
was.
how high did the water get here?
Well, as you can see up to there, that
Yeah.
level. So up to me on this level.
Yeah.
And we were just, when the evacuation team came in, it had gone up to this high to this high.
Yeah.
And I think the cameras captured us up to from here to here. And when it was mounting,
Yeah.
they were great to help us.
Yeah.
They were boat and they were jet skiing.
Yeah. And when did the water go down? Was it?
There was just after, I think, I didn't look at the time, I was so tired, but
Yeah.
I think 9, 10,
Right.
something like that.
Yeah.
So I went off to sleep at 1 after making sure people are okay in the church and people are okay in the temple.
Yeah. So did you stay here last night?
No, we were not allowed to because of the water, and also it's not safe because there was nobody here.
Yeah.
So they've cordoned off the area,
Yeah.
and we were told to go to the nearby church or the houses of the people, wherever friends. So we went all there, make sure they all go there.
Yeah.
Yes, so that was all safe. That's good.
Yeah. And you've been getting lots of support?
Yes,
Yeah.
very much support. And the first thing I landed was the insurance people, the media wanted to make sure. I was crying and they said, looks like you're with us. So they sent the tradies immediately and then working on it, ordering the supplies and all that is in the action. They're really doing great. The police was great, looking after getting ambulances and getting all the help. We needed it. The ambulances were there, police was there, fire people were there making sure, because we had kids in the kindergarten and parents were waiting. So, but it was so hard for a parent to go if the water is that high, this high. So we had to have a boat and all that stuff to go in there. And then finally, we all were relieved and we saw water coming down. And then,
And the water came up quite suddenly?
Not suddenly.
No?
It was so slow.
Yeah.
Not suddenly.
Yeah.
It just was slow.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was slow.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Yes, and it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, like to see there was a great help we had from everyone, from the community, from the media, from the people. There were some people they wanting to make sure we are okay, and then even in the morning, people just going in their cars, giving coffee and tea, because we're working hard to make sure things are out for the tradies. They can come and change whatever needed to change.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there were a lot of, there were some few pregnant ladies, little kids, little pets and cats, and little disabled people were there. Those who got their surgeries done. They all were evacuated safely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. It was hard to convince them, go, water is rising, and they were like, no, we're okay. They, no, you're not safe, come on, please go. When the water was up to that high, then they realized they need to go.
Yeah.
So I was doing the talking to all of them, come on honey, come on, let's go out of it. And they said, it will go down, I know Auckland. But then it was here, then they said, oh, you were right, let's go. And then we take them all out from there.
Yeah.
It was good. We thank you for all the community for help, and thank you to police, to fire, for ambulance, and each one who was around here last night supporting traffic. Thank you to you for coming. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like quite an evening. So
yes, it was. The rain didn't stop for a minute. It was like water right from the morning. Actually, we work in Auckland Regional Dental Service. I'm a senior dental assistant, so working in the morning, going around dropping some supplies. So in the morning I was in the rain, and I said, oh, when I go home at 4 o'clock, straight to bed. But I didn't know that water was in my car when I came in. And people were making videos, and then the water went in the car. I said, no, this is rising, we need to do something. So my colleague next door called people that we need help, and then we have ambulances and everything coming, because it's a two-story, so some of went upstairs, but then that was not a solution because the water was still here, and then you never know. So I think that was the best plan, to evacuate everybody. That was a good one.
And so how long, what happens now? What are you going to do now?
So what happened is, they told us to go and check what has happened, take your belongings and go. The oldies can go to the safe place wherever they want to, kids can go. So the strong people, those who feel they're strong, can stay back. And the insurance people are here. They came in, and then they are just going to look at their house, and they're doing all their estimates, and they're ordering supplies. And they've already sent their tradies, electrician, plumber, make sure we are safe. There's no power, there's a little power, but they're just making sure we're all safe.
Oh,
so they've started the project. They're doing the houses now.
That's great.
Which is good.
Don't
know how long it's going to take, but I'm very happy that on the first day, yesterday we had it, and they are working. The plumbers are there, electricians working now.
That's really good.
Yes.
And have your neighbours started to return, or?
I had to call them. Because they look it in the system that they're also with the Vero, and they said, "Is your neighbour there?" I said, "Yes." I give them a call. So I give them a call, urgent. They came in, they spoke, and now their house is getting done. The other people are also calling, and I said, "Come over." I called my neighbour, "Come over." They're working on us, and they were like, "No, I don't want to see my house." I said, "No, come." So they came there now, and then they all are working. We're helping each other. So very good for the other people in the street. They're coming, giving us tea or coffee, water. So that's good.
That's great. Okay, very good. All right. Well, I'll let the cameras. Take the cameras away so that you can have a little bit of peace again. So,
That's fine.
That's
okay.
Well, good luck with the cleaning up. And
yes, most welcome to see how it has damaged, and you're most welcome to have a look.
Okay.
That's fine. Anybody can go in and just check that, how they're just working hard with all that. Okay. Well,
yes.
Thank you. Most welcome.
Thank you.
So we're tidying up in the house.
Cheers, man.
I'm sorry. My name's Tom. I'm so sorry.
Yes.
That was horrible.
Yes.
I didn't catch your name.
My name is Manu.
And Ian, sorry?
M-A-N-L-W.
No,
not much yet because the water was already because our parents are quite old, and
Yeah.
we main focus was to just get them out as soon as possible from out of the house.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, most of the stuff. Yeah. But
Yeah.
let's see, whatever we can save.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Oh, thank you for letting us
No,
in.
thank you.
Anyway,
Thanks.
and all the best.
Yeah, thank you.
For the next bit.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for coming.
Very sorry that this is happening.
I hope you're doing okay.
Yeah. No, we,
It must be pretty distressing to see this and
Yeah,
then have to
it
pull it
is.
out.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you're getting the support you need with the insurance company and the
Yes.
trade people coming in.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. They're trying to best. Yeah.
Well, I wish you the best.
Thank you.
There to look out for us. I mean, this is my first time
Yeah.
to be here. This has actually happened first time to me. I've never seen natural calamity to me.
Yeah,
This is first time. But my parents were saying you got to be brave.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're somewhere safe.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you're getting a lot of support from the community and from
Yes.
all of the relevant, emergency agencies and everything. That's great. Yeah.
Yes, they're very good. Yeah, very nice. I'm happy. I've got a phone calls from some MPs around. They were good.
Yeah.
They just said if you need something, let us know. Or anybody around who can't reach us, please yell out. And I said, yeah, I will tell you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
You back to the man?
Yeah,
Okay.
Back for the press conference now.
Yep. All right. Thank
What
you.
did you think of what you saw in there?
Look, very traumatic for the families involved. Let's talk about it when I get to that.
Take that for you. Thank you.
I don't know, but I like it. Because I'm getting injury when it's going so
That's the next bit.
I know this is poor form, but I'll get slapped over the head if I leave sub or in that role. Be 1 minute.
Hey there, how are you?
If I go that side?
Yeah.
You're okay with that?
What's that? Oh, you're doing interpretation? Yeah, please, no problem. So,
That's very good, thank you.
yeah.
That way you're the next person speaking. Okay. Just a reminder, whoever's speaking, just to stand up to the microphone. Really
What?
awesome, thank you.
We'll play musical chairs. I think we might just get underway. Kia ora everybody. At 9:27 p.m. last night, Auckland Civil Defence and Emergency Management declared a state of local emergency in Auckland, allowing the government's National Emergency Management Agency to step in and support the response and coordinate the cross-government effort. The Beehive bunker was stood up last night. Myself and the Minister of Emergency Management were there to help oversee the central government's contribution to the response. We've travelled to Auckland today so that we can survey the damage ourselves and see what extra support is required now and may be required in the coming days. Our priority is to ensure that Aucklanders are safe, that they're housed and that they have access to the essential services that they need. We also want to ensure that Auckland's infrastructure is back up and running as quickly as possible. The Met Service has confirmed that yesterday was Auckland's wettest day on record. And having just surveyed some of the extensive damage, both on the ground and in the air, it's clear that it's going to be a big clean-up job. There are 3 confirmed fatalities, and at least 1 person is missing as a result of the weather. So I want to acknowledge the family and the loved ones of the deceased and offer my condolences. The loss of life underscores just the sheer scale of this weather event and how quickly it turned tragic. I want to provide a number of updates, but first a few bits of guidance for Aucklanders. If you can, stay where you are and avoid unnecessary travel. It's safer to be inside than out at the moment. Please stay out of the water. Further rain is forecast, and we saw water levels rise very quickly yesterday. Check in with family, neighbours and loved ones to make sure that they're okay. Look out for each other. And finally, of course, follow emergency instructions. aucklandemergencymanagement.org.nz has the information that you need, so you can also follow them on Facebook and Twitter as well. Despite the significant event, power is on in most of Auckland. As of 11 a.m, 23 homes and businesses have had their power restored, and as of 11 o'clock this morning there are around 3,500 who were yet to have their power back on. Supermarkets are open. There are 4 stores across all of Auckland that are closed that we're aware of at the moment. There are plenty of groceries. There is no need for panic buying, so please just shop normally. The Ministry of Social Development has stood up a support line for those who have been affected. 0800 400 100 will be available between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. today. So again, the number is 0800 400 100, and that's for anyone who might need support from MSD with things like food, bedding, clothes and alternative accommodation. Civil defence payments have been activated. The Civil Defence Centre has been, or 3 Civil Defence Centres have been stood up for those who need to evacuate and can't stay with friends and family. These are at St Leonard's Road School, 15 St Leonard's Road in Kelston, the Massey University Albany campus, the main entrance, and Manatukutuku, 32 Riverton Drive in Randwick Park. MSD are deploying staff to these welfare centres who will also be able to provide additional support. Kaingaora received 103 calls to their contact centre overnight, approximately half of those indicating that they may need some temporary accommodation. An assessment of public and community housing is underway today to assess the levels of damage there. Auckland Transport has posted extensive updates on the state of the transport network. As I said, the level of devastation in some areas is considerable. The government's allocating funding to help establish the Mayoral Relief Fund. We've allocated the maximum amount that the Minister can allocate without a full Cabinet decision. And I do want to reassure Aucklanders that that is a start and that we will be providing more support in the coming days. We are anticipating further bad weather. So my message is to Aucklanders at the moment who might be seeing a little bit of blue sky out there is don't take that for granted yet. There could still be more bad weather on the way. I do want to take a moment before I hand over to the Mayor to thank all of those who have been involved in the emergency response. Our first responders, our police, fire and emergency, St John's and others, the lines company workers and those who do road maintenance who have been helping to get the power back on and to get the roads reopened again. I want to involve all those others who have been involved in the emergency response, health workers, supermarket workers, many of whom have been out helping others whilst also facing disruption at home as well. We want to acknowledge them and thank them. And I want to acknowledge the way Aucklanders have come together and supported each other. People who have opened their doors to neighbours and loved ones and provided them with a bed for the night, somewhere safe and dry to stay. This is an unprecedented event in recent memory. In the aftermath, we will have plenty of time to evaluate the response and ensure that all appropriate actions and communications have occurred in a timely way. But for now, our focus is on making sure that we support Aucklanders through this. We remain completely focused on the safety and well-being of Aucklanders and making sure that we are providing the full resources of central and local government to get Auckland back up and running as soon as possible. I'll now hand over to the Mayor to say a few words.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I'm Wayne Brown, the Mayor, and last night was a tough night for all of the city, its citizens and its leadership. I'd really like to thank and really acknowledge just about everything you said, to be honest, but all of those who were out there from early yesterday afternoon right through the night. The civil defence workers, the police, fire and emergency, St John's, and all those other people that were out there and have been out there ever since. I'd also like to share my concerns and worries for the families that were deeply affected, particularly the very sad case of people who've lost their lives. That's something we should all bitterly regret. And it does show the intensity of this, which was the largest rainfall event we've had. It took a lot of concentration, it happened quickly, and the response was way quicker than people acknowledge. There were thousands of people out there well before 9:27 when we did actually announce the declaration, which the lead fire and emergency gentleman has just confirmed was at the right time for what they wanted. It wasn't preventing them being out there. Everybody was out there way before and lasted all night long. There's a lot of us have got droopy eyes today from that, and it's nice to see that the sun has come out, but as the Prime Minister said, it's not going to stay out. You can't guarantee that. Today, earlier this morning, I got all the leaders of the council together so that we can coordinate the large number of staff that we've got out there as well, including building inspectors, people visiting and giving guidance, and to ensure that we get the most effective response from the resources that we've got available. I've visited the Emergency Management Centre, and I'd like to thank the people in there who are working hard and coordinating what is a complex. This happened in the night, and it's very complex for those people to fully understand what's happened. For some people, it was a very focused, dreadful, sudden storm, and for other people, it was a night of rain. And today, I'm delighted to see it's getting better, and we will review everything that took place. We've got to make sure that we had the coordination and the consultation with the public correct, the messages correct, and there is a lot of messages to be learnt about how we build and look after our environment. some of those houses, when you think about it, actually shouldn't have been where they are. There are some lessons. We will take our time to do that, but make absolutely sure we will review everything we've learnt from the storm, and we are going to learn lessons. I'm looking forward to working with the Minister, both Ministers, and all Ministers actually, and we've agreed we're going to work together, because this is the lessons that we will learn here will have a place in other parts of New Zealand as well, and so that's worked out to be excellent as well. So I'd like to thank you for coming up here promptly. It wasn't easy for you to get here actually, but well done. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to open up for questions now.
Minister, was the state of emergency call too late?
Look, I'm not going to get into second-guessing those decisions. We're providing all of the support that we possibly can now. Plenty of time to look back later, and the Mayor and I have both had conversations about the fact that we will. But for now, the focus has got to be on supporting Auckland through, making sure that we're responding and that we're recovering.
But people did not feel well informed last night. There was a communications void. How concerned are you about that?
Look, we've been working to make sure that we're providing, clear communications. Central government's doing its bit to support that communications effort. As I've said, I want to focus on getting Auckland through the next, the next period, and I'm sure that's where the council's focus will be as well.
Just a question for the Mayor. Why the relative lack of communication from your office until later in the evening?
Well, first of all, we're communicating all afternoon with the emergency services and understanding what it is that they want. There was a widespread misinterpretation, the fact that you had to declare this to make something happen. I'd just like, can you comment, did that arrive at the right time for you?
Ron Devlin, Fire Emergency Region Manager.
Can you just stand in front of the microphone?
Ron Devlin, Region Manager, Fire and Emergency. Look, senior police and fire officers started to assess the risks and needs around about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 1600 hours. And we continue to do that right through the process as the weather event was unfolding. We're all very experienced in this area, we've dealt with it many times, and we were judging what was coming through from the data and the intel that we were getting. When we considered around 6 o'clock, should we ask for this? We did not, because we didn't feel at that time it was needed. Right? When we did ask for it later in the evening, we had the declaration within minutes of requesting it.
Why did you not think it was necessary? Why did you not think it was necessary at 6 o'clock yesterday evening? At that point, highways were flooded, people had been evacuated from their house, and I think someone had already died at that point.
I would take. I'm not sure you're correct in all of your details there, to be quite honest with you. But however, I say again, right? We are experienced in looking at this. We keep on top of it all the way through. We look at the data, right, and the intel that's been fed into our operation centres, and we make those decisions. And it one of the major things when you're managing this type of risk and managing very large communities like this is to ensure that you don't get in the way of that community actually doing what it's supposed to do.
What do you say though to the, I mean, I'm sure all of us here, we've spoken to hundreds of Aucklanders today. I know I've spoken to dozens on my own, and every one of them has mentioned the poor communication from the council, whether it be the Mayor's office or CDEM. What do you say to those people? Because it's not us who are saying there's a communication breakdown, it is the public, and hundreds of them.
And it's a question of political leadership as well as signing a declaration.
So from the point of view of the question you asked me around communications, we had a number of communication platforms live, and that would be fed out through the Emergency Management Office, who were acquitting themselves well as far as we could see. From a point of view of police and fire, we were on the end of making sure that we were resourcing and getting assets on the ground to continue to assess the situation and to make sure that we had that situational awareness that was important to make the decisions that the community needed us to make. Out of my jurisdiction, I'm afraid.
So my name's Andrew Clark. I'm the controller for emergency management. So to enable that texting system to be as effective as it can be, you need concrete and accurate messages that are relevant at the time for people to hear. I think the timing of the communications, there was communications going out through various social media channels. The event was beyond anything we've ever seen. Our focus was on physical safety of individuals. We were airlifting people off roofs with helicopters. We were retrieving people who were in their vehicles, potentially getting submerged. So that was the absolute priority. And the second thing that we needed to do was have shelter for vulnerable people who were displaced. So normally you can do that in parallel and send out timely messaging. But we had a profound problem. We had a crisis within a crisis. So the evacuation centres, or CDCs as they're known, we have a portfolio of them so that we can use any of those depending on where an emergency takes place. A lot of those were taken out by this event. They were actually unfit to move people into. So we're in a situation sort of late evening where we had to go and find places to house people, and we had to go and deploy people in the middle of a flood event, potentially at risk of them. So we had to assess whether that was viable or not and stand up places we'd never used before. So the CDCs that we're using now aren't ones that we normally use. So that had to be our priority. We messaged as well as we could, but we don't make any apologies for focusing on those two things.
And would it help to have some of the central government resource defence, with vehicles that can get through the floodwaters? When we saw yesterday ambulances having to wait at the end of roads while people on airbeds were pulled down flooded roads.
So look, all I can say to that is in the midst of this yesterday about 9 o'clock, we asked the Met Service, when is this going to stop, so that we can get more aggressive on doing what you're saying, getting out there with emergency vehicles. And the answer was it's not going to stop till midnight. So the next question was, how intense is it going to be? And the answer was it's going to be pretty much as intense as this. It's going to go south to the Hanuas. So as I say, we were dealing with something that was still happening. We had difficulties, I think in the northern, the western CDC, the Red Cross were reluctant to go out until it was safe. We had them stood up, and we had to be confident that we could set those up in a timely manner. So this thing was continuing to happen, unprecedented, and we couldn't rely on the normal recourse for those emergency centres. We actually had to find them in a matter of minutes, if not hours, and stand them up. So that influenced the pace of the communications early. We certainly got feedback that there was anxiety out there. So what we did, and I'm thinking back to midnight, post-midnight, I think if you go back, you'll check that the communications increased significantly as we stood those CD centres up, as we'd lifted the people who are at risk of drowning or falling off their roof. So we were in a position to then start communicating what we knew. To the FENS manager's point, we were gathering information under very, very difficult circumstances. So, there's only so much you can communicate unless you have the facts at your disposal. You can tell people concrete information.
Surely if it was a difficult
question for the Mayor, because these are your constituents after all, and it's them voicing their concerns about the lack of communication from the council that you lead, and in some cases your office. So what's your message to them, not us, to the people out there who have expressed frustration?
Well, I was at my desk from 4 o'clock right through the whole thing to the early hours of the morning, and I'm receiving information from a complex range of people who are out on the ground in a storm in the dark at the night. And they were open and honest that they were in themselves struggling to fully understand what was happening. It was an event which Auckland hasn't had before, and so I followed the advice of the professionals and kept to it all the time. I ensured that all of our staff were deployed in the most successful and most efficient manner. We ensured that we brought all of our resources to it, but I followed the leadership of the professionals. The particular legal situation that affects the Mayor is the only person who can actually sign a declaration of a state of local emergency, and so that is a formal situation. It is a document which carries with it responsibilities, and it's not something you do lightly. And so I followed exactly the advice from those who do it regularly, and they will tell you that it came at the time exactly that they wanted it.
Did they advise you to say nothing? That's what the questions are about. That you said nothing.
Can I perhaps interject there?
That's a question for the Mayor.
But I can help inform that question. So the declaration was discussed way before the actual declaration announcement. It was discussed between 5 and 6 p.m. As part of the emergency management function. We saw the weather event was emerging. We said, if this is needed, what will be the trigger point for this? And the trigger point is emergency services out in the field telling us that they either have a resourcing or a powers issue. They need more powers. They indicated that they were quite comfortable as to where they were at pretty early before the downpour really took hold. As that unfolded and they got more intel, it became rapidly apparent that in this particular instance, the powers that they needed were police powers to be able to evacuate people from their homes who were perhaps reluctant to leave their homes, but there was a life and health and safety situation, coupled with people who wanted to go back to their homes and it was unsafe. So that was the trigger for the declaration. I think the point was made earlier, this response kicked off between 4 and 5 o'clock. We assembled the whole emergency management function, including our colleagues in fire and ambulance and everybody else, police, and we were full on into this. So the declaration wasn't the trigger point for responding to this. It was a particular formal process to allow Peace to have some extra powers to do a particular thing that they needed to do at that point in time.
Prime Minister, can we ask the Prime Minister about the communications, please? Yes. Prime Minister, were you frustrated by the lack of communication? I mean, at one point you had the Transport Agency clock off for the night and no longer tell Aucklanders what roads were closed.
Look, I accept that people who will have questions, they'll have observations, and in the fullness of time there'll be an appropriate time to go through those things. At the moment, I want the people to my right focused on the response. They're still in the middle of the response, and I think we need to give them the space to be able to do that. Undoubtedly, when this is reviewed, there will be lessons to be learned from the experience. But for now, while I acknowledge that people will have things that they want to say and they will have questions about what's happened in the last 24 hours, I think the most important thing is supporting Auckland through the next 24 hours and beyond. And then we will have an opportunity, and we will do it as soon as we can, to go back and look at how things could be done differently.
Do you have any responders who last night felt abandoned by the city and the government?
Well, they weren't.
They certainly weren't.
They felt that way.
Well, but they were not. What we were doing was ensuring that they were not actually abandoned. We were ensuring that there was thousands of people out there, and that's what I was doing. But he wasn't here. I was making sure that that took place.
Mr. Brown, the people who were also here, of course, were your councillors in their wards out and about. We've spoken to one of them, Jo Bartley, who says she does not believe the response from your office, from the council, was adequate. She was on the ground. She was seeing what was happening. People were telling her, we're at comms. So what do you say to her concerns?
Shane Henderson, who's the councillor of this, was the first person to be on site in the street that we were at before, actually. And he immediately rang me, and so that we had, and that was useful communication. That's communicating so that we know what was going on the ground. One or two of our councillors chose to communicate, but there's no sense communicating things which are just your view. You have to communicate facts, and the facts were coming from these people here, and I'm driven by that. And in fact, the first feedback we got from that there was a problem in South Auckland was in fact customers of a business that I own, way before some of the councillors started tossing their. We don't. What we need to do was be calm, sensible, let the people in charge take charge and support them, and ensure that we had the resources of people out there. And people misunderstood some of the stuff that came from some of those people who wanted to communicate stuff that they didn't know. Let people think that the declaration was needed for work to be done, and it wasn't at all. It was just a small part of the whole thing. You've got to understand that.
You just said that the message needed to be calm, it needed to be clear, it needed to be listened to the experts, right? And it needed to be expert-driven. But why wasn't that message, the one, the spiel you've just given to the public yesterday? From here, be calm, listen to the experts. People did not feel they had that from you.
Well, that was because they must be listening to others. We gave that message out, and perhaps we'll learn that we have to give that out better next time. But the other part about it is that we have perhaps too many spokespersons for the council. In other councils, I would give those things. The mayor should be. But if everyone else wants to compete with it, that in itself is confusing. If I can be drowned out by other people, then they're not going to hear what I'm saying. And I said repeatedly that I have full confidence in these gentlemen and their training and their resources. We're at no stage were we short of resources out there. The actual decision that came from the thing was when they suddenly found they were overwhelmed. And at that stage they said, sign this thing, and we signed it within 2 minutes.
Prime Minister, the Prime Minister, please. Do you have a message to Aucklanders who felt abandoned last night by their city and their government?
Look, as I've said, I think there will be an appropriate time to go over everything that's happened in the last 24 hours. As soon as I was aware of the scale of the issue, I went into Wellington, we activated the Beehive bunker, and we were liaising and providing as much support as we possibly could to the team on the ground, the local team on the ground. Of course, it's the nature of these things that those responses are led by a local team. And so we were working to support them as best we can. As I've said, I have seen from my visit here today the impact on the communities that have really been affected by this. I've seen the scale of the damage in some areas, and clearly the government, the central government, will work with the local teams here to make sure that we're providing as much support as we can to ensure that people are kept safe. To ensure that if there is more bad weather in the next little while, that we are doing everything we can to support people through that, and that we help with the recovery.
Have you reassured them with more rain on the way that what happened last night will not happen again in terms of communications? The communications are being led locally. The government, the central government, will do all we can to support that. So,
sorry, can I?
People to your right?
Can I just reference the Prime Minister's comment? So after we got through immediacy of yesterday's rescue operation effectively and shelter, we upped the pace of the communications. That's improved further today. We are getting a heck of a lot more information from the field. We've got people fanning out and telling us what's happening, particularly our building inspectors, urban search and rescue people and others, foreign emergency services. So we are sending out pretty comprehensive information as we have as we get the group together and go through all of the different facets of this. But on an ongoing basis, we've upped the pace of whatever comes to hand. So
there was a communications failure?
I think the communications at the start were a little bit slower, but they were slower for the reasons that I've outlined. We had to grapple with what was in front of us, and we had to prioritise health and safety and shelter over being able to send out communications initially as quickly as we could. By that I mean by about midnight, once we'd had these CDCs stood up, we started to up the pace of the communications, again, partially because we had more to tell Aucklanders around where to go and what was happening. Remembering the event unfolded till about 12, we had foreign emergency services out there who only really got a full appreciation of the extent of what they were grappling with around the time that the declaration was issued. Full-on response before that, but the formal declaration to give them the additional responsibilities that they needed. So I'm perfectly happy to accept that the communications was a bit slow initially. We did send social media messages out. It's not like there wasn't communications, but they intensified as we got into this and we got more information and had more to share. And today we're seeing a further ramp up.
Prime Minister, do you have confidence in the leadership of Auckland Council?
Look, that's not a question for me. The local response is led locally, and the central government will provide as much support as we're asked for and as much support as we can.
It is a question for
migrant
you.
workers can't get wind support. What are you going to do about that?
Look, I'm happy to look at that.
Prime Minister, were you at the bunker waiting for the call from Auckland Council last night? When did you first hear from them, and were you just waiting to help?
Actually, in the first instance, the communications between the Auckland Council and central government were handled by the Minister for Emergency Management. I was available as soon as it became apparent that I needed to be available, and we were working to make sure that we were doing everything we could to help particularly streamline those communications.
Do you think it's a shame the central government didn't become involved earlier? Send the Defence Force in to help evacuate people? And instead it had to be done by communities, in jandals, walking down in floodwaters.
To be clear, these responses, by their nature, will always be led locally, bearing in mind that some of the members of the local team were unable to interact with each other in person because they themselves were impeded. Their movement was very difficult. So, look, I think it's important that we give the people who are leading this response the chance to deal with the issues that are immediately in front of them, and there will be plenty of opportunity to look back on how things could be improved. I'm going to have to catch a plane. I'm not wanting to avoid this, but I'm going to have to catch a plane very shortly.
Minister, would a question?
I don't have an estimate on that. I don't have an estimate on that
Are you
either.
taking pages to Cabinet in relation to this, or you need to take more money to Cabinet? Are you pausing your reshuffle, which is scheduled for this week? And
Look, haven't even had a chance to think about
How
that.
much have you put in the fund?
Can we
Sorry?
ask a
How
question
much
to
have you put in
Minister?
the fund?
There's $100,000 which the Minister for Emergency Management can authorise, so that has been authorised. I want to be clear though, that's seed funding. That is, the more funding will be available.
Can we ask a question to Minister Wood? Why did Waka Kotahi last night stop communicating to the public? You even went on social media and said that you'd urgently asked them to log back on. Have you asked why they stopped communicating?
Yes, that's right. The Waka Kotahi social media feed finished its initial round of communications around about 7:30, 7:40 last night. I became aware of that shortly thereafter, and it was my view that it was important they continued to communicate with people important information about the transport system. I raised that with them immediately, and later in the evening they recommenced communication. I think that was important. I've said to them that I want to fully understand why that was. We'll work through that over the coming week. The key thing in the meantime was that they got that communication out there, and they've continued informing Aucklanders and people in the Coromandel and Northland about the transport issues. And I do want to thank the teams at Waka Kotahi and all the contractors who have been working all night and all morning to try and restore those important connections.
You were on the ground last night. When did it become clear to you that this was an unprecedented emergency?
Well, I was in my community of Mount Roskill last night, and as the evening wore on, it became clear this was a very serious event. Pretty near to my house, we have the headwaters of the Oakley Creek, and it floods from time to time, but by about mid-evening it was at the highest levels I'd ever seen it, and it was clear that there was a lot more rain coming on the way. So it became fairly evident from that and other community contacts that this would be a serious event.
Mid-evening, say 7 o'clock.
Can you describe what you saw today on your walkabout and as you flew into Auckland this morning?
Sure. And then I'm going to have to go after this. I had the opportunity to view Auckland by land and by air today, so I saw the extent of some of the slip damage, which is quite extensive in some areas, and then also I was able to visit some of the areas on the ground that have been affected, and I saw the impact that it had on people's homes. And of course that supplements the information that I received last night, which I was receiving live in real time through people posting video clips and so on of the extent of the challenge that they were facing. And I want to just acknowledge Aucklanders' resilience, the way Aucklanders have come together to support one another. It was an incredibly difficult set of circumstances. People were physically separated because of just the huge volume of water that they were dealing with. As I said, the most rainfall on record ever, and therefore, I want to just acknowledge the way Aucklanders got through that, but also just a bit of a reminder that there is more rain forecast, and so whilst it's not raining right at the moment, I'm sure that's very welcome for everybody, and some of those floodwaters have receded. People still need to keep an eye on things. All right, thanks everybody.
Mr. Meady, we understand you started your day with a game of tennis. Between the tennis match and 4 p.m.
Well, you got that wrong, mate.
Okay. Take us through what you did then yesterday.
My desk.
In the
And I
afternoon?
stayed the whole... As the gentleman there will say, it wasn't a major issue until later in the late afternoon was when it certainly became different from a wet day. At that stage I never left my desk, and I communicated with all the broad range of people. You've got to understand that the council is a piece of a complex thing. The council I've been given has Auckland Transport, which in theory we control but have their own separate things. Waka Kotahi, which the government control from Wellington. There is the fire and emergency, police, and the Auckland emergency for which the duty controller, Andrew, was in charge yesterday and worked with me through the afternoon. I spoke with and informed Minister McAnally several times during yesterday's evening. I don't want to bother the Prime Minister if he needed to elevate that. The appropriate person for me to speak to was him. Unlike some of my councillors, I represent the entire district, and I'm thinking of all of Auckland, and it was very hard to get a clear picture of what was happening across Auckland. There's no sense communicating if you haven't got clear stuff to communicate. So we stuck with stay inside, be careful, and listen to what they say. And if I can't tell the public to listen to the professional experts, I've got to do it myself. And that's important to me, and I've followed very closely everything that I was told, and I have to trust. I checked carefully that this gentleman was in close contact with all the leaders of those organisations, and we were trying to find out right across the district. I didn't have the luxury of worrying about one suburb. You've got to understand that.
We do need to get that rest of the council, guys.
Emergency.
Okay.
We've got to do the night
An
shift.
hour to tell anyone that had been declared.